Hello and welcome back guys. Today we are going to start new story, MHAX Godzilla, written by Anthony Tyler 9. So let's begin where everything began. This just in. A kaiju attack has just been seen coming towards the shorelines of Japan. We urge our citizens to head to fallout shelters in order to get away from the kaiju. A voice from the television said, before it was turned off. A young man was seen standing near the front door of his home as he looked back at his mother who was behind him as well. "Alright Izuku, do you have everything you need to go to the store with me?" Izuku's mother asked. "I have everything mom, we need to head out soon. The kaiju are coming near Japan's coast, so we need to keep everything short." Izuku said, as his mother sighed sadly before nodding. As the small family of two moved out of their home to get some groceries, they had failed to listen to the rest of the broadcast as it made mention that those who were going to the shopping mall that day were going to be subjected to the battle of the kaiju that were duking it out. As Izuku and his mother walked around the aisles of the store, they felt the ground vibrate slightly as they looked to one another before nodding. Continuing to collect their things, they heard the roar of a kaiju nearby as the building was broken down, causing those within to run away. Izuku placed himself over his mother in order to protect her from the building's collapse. Once everything was said and done, Izuku woke up to a devastated area and to see two titans fighting against one another nearby, and he saw his mother near him as she tried to move some rubble. "Izuku!" she called out, as he groaned, gaining her attention. Once she started to move the rubble out of the way, she managed to pull him out from underneath all of it when Izuku noticed how a stray blast of electricity and atomic energy was moving towards them. Mom. We need to move," Izuku said, as he tried to move both himself and her out of the way, only to be met with his mother blocking the hit from him. "Don't worry baby, I will protect you," she said, as both attacks hit her dead on and disintegrated her from this world, but most importantly they were absorbed by his body. Guh. Izuku groaned as his body had felt so full that he couldn't move. "What the heck just entered my body? I can't move at all," Izuku thought to himself as he noticed the lack of a presence from his mother. Looking up from his groaning, he saw what remained of her clothing on the ground as her body was nowhere to be seen. Mom?" Izuku asked, with a broken voice. In the sky a fight was happening between Godzilla and Ghidorah. The monster Zero had been attempting to get Godzilla to stand down, but he wouldn't. It wasn't long before Godzilla had forced the monster to flee from the area, as he managed to drive him off. Godzilla looked around at the devastation of the city of Japan and he couldn't help but feel remorse for what had happened. His fight with Ghidorah had been pulled towards the innocence of Earth, but that is besides the point. He was the king of the monsters, and why did he bring the fight here? Looking around he found a small trace of radiation coming from the ground nearby, and as he moved closer to the source, he soon found it. A small boy from his perspective was lying on the ground crying over a small pile of clothes that looked feminine. Oh dear. He killed a family member of a human again. Sighing internally, he had no idea of what to do. This boy had the gift of Mother Gaia, and he couldn't allow him to be in the hands of the humans as of right now. He seemed to be relatively young, so that wouldn't matter for now. Leaning over he found the boy hearing his growling before looking up at him with shock, fear as well as sadness. It had been millions of years since he last connected with a human, but he must make sure that the little hatchling was all right and take him somewhere safe. Once he felt a connection with the small being, he began to speak to him telepathically. "Hello little human, I'm terribly sorry for what happened. I should have been able to keep Ghidorah away from this place. I can't keep you in the hands of humans for a while. Mother Gaia's gift has been developing within you for a small while. You need to gestate within a radiated core in order to develop further," Godzilla said to the young boy. He looked around the place to try and find where the voice was coming from before looking up and pointing at him. Giving the boy a nod, he looks at the clothes on the ground before grabbing them, and as soon as Godzilla's hand was lowered enough to pick him up, he climbed on as they headed towards the nearest water source. "I'm going to have to place you within my mouth in order to keep you alive." "I'm sorry," Godzilla said, as Izuku nodded his head as he was placed inside the monster's mouth. Once it was completed, Godzilla found the ocean as he entered it and swam towards where his radiator core was within the planet. As soon as a few hours had passed, they arrived within the core, and it was revealed to be the lost city of Atlantis. Godzilla opened his maw and placed the young boy on the ground as Izuku explored the area. He knew that Godzilla and Ghidorah was the cause of his mother's death, but he didn't blame the protector of Earth for it. He was only fighting with the monster so that he wouldn't cause the end of the planet, so he would place the entire blame on the monster for it. As soon as Godzilla had placed himself near the core of the planet, he started to absorb the radiation of the planet as he rejuvenated himself. Izuku at this point had placed himself against his giant arm as he laid back holding the clothes of his late mother. "What happens to me now?" Izuku asked. "You will undergo the transformation of becoming a Titan. But other than that, you will get to keep your body," Godzilla said, as he slowly glowed a dark blue and black before revealing his human form. He was taller than Izuku's father at 6 feet 7 inches and had gray scales that covered his arms and legs as well as upper torso around his neck. The scales formed a sort of armor around the man as he held a Nodachi sword on his hip. On his rear, his tail moved out as far as twice his human form. "I'm terribly sorry about what happened to your mother, but in order to fully make you a Titan I will need to place you within an egg before giving you the right of reincarnation," Godzilla said, as he led Izuku over to where an egg was placed. What happened to this egg?" Izuku asked. Godzilla said, growling. "So what does that have to do with me?" Izuku asked, as Godzilla looked sad at him. "I would have to consume you and the egg so that it could be bonded with both me and Mothra. Once the process is complete I will essentially lay the egg here so that you could gestate to become a new Gojira," Godzilla said, looking down at the ground. "Oh, well at least I have a choice, right?" Izuku asked. "Well there is either that or experience the pain of having to become a Titan without that method. Your body would be placed under many pressures in order to transform you into one of us, but you would still become similar to myself since my power is coursing through you. But you would also have the power over electricity, based on the power of Ghidorah I sense within you," Godzilla said, as Izuku looked pale. "Why you know what, I think I would rather take the egg option," Izuku mumbled as Godzilla rubbed the boy's back. "Oh yeah, before the ceremony begins, Godzilla, you do know that I am 14, right?" Izuku asked, as the creature looked at him shocked. I thought you were just a 10-year-old," he said, placing his hands over the sides of his face. "Well I look younger than I am because of the fact that I am short. I always wanted to be slightly taller to seem more like my age. But whatever, that means people would not take me seriously," Izuku said, as he looked at the egg. So how do we do this?" Izuku asked as Godzilla gained a serious look. "You climb into the egg, and as it closes around you I will transform into my Titan form and swim over to Mothra's home. There we will do you know what, before the egg is embedded with both of our powers. But if anything, you would become a Titan since you would be lathered in our Godzilla said, as Izuku nodded his head blushing. "Well when should we start?" Izuku asked, as Godzilla looked at him for a second before thinking. "Do you want to do it now?" he asked, as Izuku nodded. "Alright let's begin the process," Godzilla said, as Izuku climbed into the 2-meter-tall egg. As soon as he was situated inside of the egg, he watched as the flaps of the egg had folded over leaving Izuku in darkness as he felt the surrounding eggshell be lifted from the ground and be completely eaten. He felt the egg's walls be pushed against his body as the egg got his measurements from being squeezed tight. As soon as that was done, Izuku felt something prodding his skin and found some needle-like threads that were piercing through his skin. "Oh wow, that is weird but slightly worrying," Izuku said to himself as he felt the world around himself become more and more distant from consciousness. On the outside, Godzilla had entered the water as he made his way over to his mate Mothra. He knew that the insect would be happy about him giving her another chance to have a child once more. He could only hope that Ghidorah wouldn't find out about this egg, and he would make sure that it was hidden properly in the case that he died against the foul creature. Time seems to fly for Izuku as he sat in the egg as it slowly filled with weird juices. He had no idea what was happening on the outside world, but it felt weird. The glowing liquid was moving about his feet as they moved towards his upper body, and his body for some reason glowed as well. He felt his conscience was fading little by little as he tried his best to stay awake for this process. Unknown to him, the action outside was getting near its CLMX. It wasn't that long after the event happened that Izuku lost consciousness as the liquid juices had covered his entire body and head with them. As Izuku lost consciousness, he was feeling his body becoming more and more similar to Godzilla's as he was reliving his memories as a child. Being born as a human to Inko Midoriya and Hisashi Midoriya. The man never really stayed with them since he was reportedly an accident to his father, since the man never wanted kids and had somehow gotten his mother pregnant. Then came the 4-year time skip to his 4th birthday as he was taken to the doctor about 5 weeks afterwards since his quirk just wouldn't appear. You should probably just give up. The doctor told him, as the scene changed to how Izuku sat in front of his computer looking at a video which gave him his dream to be a hero. Fear not, citizens. For I am here. A manly voice called out. Oh my God, he has saved 100 people already. And he just doesn't stop. Another voice called out. A younger Izuku, around 4 years of age, had been looking at the video with sadness shown on his face as tears brimmed his eyes. His mother entered the room as she saw his look as well as the tears building up. Can I be a hero too? The younger Izuku asked, as he stared at his mother. Tears brimmed her eyes before they were released as she ran over and hugged her son, apologizing for not being capable of giving him a quirk. And apologizing for not being able to help him in his sadness as well as not being able to be like everyone else. The scene changed once again to where Izuku is now 6 years old, as he stands before his friend Kaken, the boy using his quirk to explode his hands in an intimidating way. What are you supposed to do, Deku? You're quirkless. Kaken said. I will stop you. A hero doesn't pick on others, Kaken. Izuku said, as he stared at him. Huh? What are you talking about? I am just showing them their place. Kaken said, as he stared at Izuku ferally. What you are doing, Kaken, it's villainous. Izuku said, causing the boy to stare at him angrily. I will be the hero one. I am not going to be told that I am a villain by you, you quirkless freak. Kaken said, as he exploded Izuku many times that day. Laying on the ground, he never noticed how the young boy he had saved had ran off long before Izuku had been beaten up. It was that day that I learned that not everyone is treated as equal. Izuku thought to himself as the dreams changed again. This time it was near the middle school years of his life, from what he remembered the early years of his school life. He was in his 6th grade when these events are happening now. Oh shoot. Kaken is now taller than Izuku, as said boy is now at least a few inches below the boy in height. Izuku was sent flying into a brick wall as he held his left arm in pain. It was red as well as bleeding from how his bone was sticking out of his bicep. Maybe that will teach you to not spout your CRP, you worthless Deku. You are just a pebble on my path to become the #1 hero. Kaken spouted with a feral grin. Izuku waited until the boy left before heading to the nurse's office in order to get his arm fixed, but as soon as he arrived at the room, he saw that the woman wasn't there this time. Finding a few materials in order to set his arm back into place, he pushed the bone back into his arm as he grunted in massive pain. Breathe, breathe, breathe. I will try to keep my thoughts from coming out. That might get Kaken to leave me alone. Izuku said, as he covered his wound with some bandages. That was when the nurse had entered and looked at him with a sneer. What are you doing in here, you quirkless animal? She said, as she grabbed his arm that was seriously hurt. Gah! Izuku called out in pain, as he was tossed out of the nurse's office. And stay out. If you want to be looked at, go to the hospital. We have no place for quirkless freaks like you. The nurse said, as she shut the door. As soon as the memory was complete, he noticed how everything looked like it was coming to a head when it revealed his last memory that was incredibly hurtful to his mind. The classroom was filled with students as Izuku stared around the place and found his older self near the back of the room too enthralled with his notebook. The others around him made comments about his quirklessness as he started to curl in on himself. It wasn't long after that the teacher entered the class talking about future careers as well as what high school the students wanted to go to. As soon as his name was stated though, that was when all hell broke loose as Kaken had moved to attack him. Blowing up his desk causing him to flinch hard and fall out of it as Kaken himself had grabbed his collar and started spewing his dream of being a hero without a quirk as being that a dream. Before causing the whole class to talk about how he as being quirkless couldn't get into the same school as Kaken since he had no quirk to rely on. The dream-like memory slightly changes as it now reveals Kaken's last words to him before the attack at the mall and Izuku just looks tired now. "Hey, we're not done yet Deku," Kaken said, as Izuku looked up from his seat. As the Izuku in the memory looks over at Kaken, he stood up as soon as his notebook was taken from him. Hero analysis for the future. What a nerd. One of Kaken's lackeys said, as he laughed at Izuku. Still trying to be a hero with your stalker notes. Well, maybe this will help you remember that your dream is not realistic. Kaken said, blowing up the notes. No. I worked so hard to get those. Do you realize how much work went into that? Izuku in the memory called out. They are just stalker notes, I'm sure that you have another copy somewhere at your home. Well, I will say this though, there might be a way for you to become a hero. Kaken said, as Izuku looked over in hope. Maybe he will give me the courage to become one. Izuku thought foolishly. Pray you get a quirk in your next life and jump off the roof. Maybe then you might be able to become a hero. Katsuki said, as he walked over to the door. Inside Izuku's head what was akin to glass shattering in his mind was heard as soon as he heard Kaken's words. Izuku stared at Katsuki in fury as the young man had activated his quirk illegally in order to cull the boy's anger and replace it with fear. Izuku would then be seen walking out of the school a few hours later in the memory as he arrived at his home with a sad expression that his mother caught sight of. What is wrong Izuku? Inko Midoriya, Izuku's mother asked. And nothing, just I'm not hungry tonight mom. I need to think about some things. Izuku said, as he thought about what Katsuki told him. As soon as everything was said and done, the flaps above Izuku's head opened up after an eternity, and he slowly woke up from his slumber. Climbing out of his egg chamber, and falling to the ground, he looked about the area as he tried to wonder what in the world just happened. Titanic introductions. Godzilla and Mothra watched over the egg as they were preparing for the arrival of their new Goji pup, and they were over the moon over it. They had been collecting tons upon tons of radiation in order to feed it before the child would come out after the rite of reincarnation. During the first month both parents have been getting weird dreams about their pup's life before becoming a titan, and now they wanted to murder this person named Kaken. In these dreams they were like more memories of their pup as a human than anything else. They were surprised when they found out that his peers didn't do a thing for when it came to treating him well. They knew that their pup needed all the attention they could get before entering that school he talked about with his mother in these dreams, but that would require a few more months of training to be completed as soon as his egg hatched. It was near the 5th month that Goji and Mothra were getting antsy about why the egg wasn't hatching. Thoughts about whether they accidentally crushed the life form inside the egg crossed their minds many times. That was until the egg flaps opened up on top. As they watched as a small Ghidorah was climbing out of the egg, they cooed at how it crawled on all fours like a lizard. It then looked around itself as if trying to figure out what was going on before seemingly noticing their presence and looking up. It was a surprise to be sure when they saw the dark marks covering his cheeks as if they were freckles, as well as the piercing jade eyes staring into their blue as well as Mothra's blue eyes as well. Moving his face downward, Godzilla placed his maw near the baby's maw as he connected to the child on a telepathic level. Oh my God, what happened to me? I can't believe that I look like you. Do I call you Dad, and Mom what do I do? The little Ghidorah's mind scrambled to think as it thought it was thinking to itself. Godzilla and Mothra chuckled in their grunts and soft roars as the little Ghidorah startled and looked up at them. You can call us anything you want pup. You are our child now, a child of Mother Earth. Godzilla said, as Mothra looked down at the little Ghidorah. Goji was correct in his little assumption about what you would do as soon as awakening. Mothra giggled, as the little Ghidorah looked up. Who are you? He asked, his little tail wagging all the while. My name is Mothra, but the Japanese people of Monarch call me Mosura. Nice to meet you, Izuku. Mothra said, as she stared at Izuku before transforming into a humanoid form. Godzilla did the same as Izuku followed suit as they became their human counterparts, Godzilla looking like an Olympian god who was ready for battle, as Mothra looked as if she was a goddess of Greece. Mothra's human form had long blonde, white hair that extended to her upper back as her fluff from her moth form had centered itself around her chest and lower neck. Her eyes were an orange-black color for her pupils as they showed her moth form in them. Looking at Izuku, she found that his form looked similar to Godzilla's except for the missing blade as well as her eyes of what he looked like as a titan. Nice to formally meet you, Izuku Midoriya. I am Mothra, Queen of the Monsters. Mothra said, introducing herself. Izuku looked completely confused as he then bowed to her as she giggled at his formality. Don't do that, little pup, you will be the heir to the throne as the next in line to become Godzilla. Goji said, as he huffed. Izuku looked at them before feeling something growing out of his back and looked to see that his form had large spines like a stegosaurus and his tail had the coloring as well as some fluff from his titan mother. As he stared at his surroundings now, he noticed that there was a skeleton nearby that seemed similar to an old enemy of Godzilla. Is that Anguirus? Izuku asked, pointing at the skeleton. Nope, that was his far distant relative though. It was Ankylogyrus. Godzilla said, ruffling Izuku's now more fluffy hair. You wish to become a hero, correct, son? Godzilla asked, incredibly serious. Yes, more than anything. But even after All Might stopped that dream from becoming true with his words, I still wish to become one. Even if it is as an underground hero. Izuku said, as Mothra stated something. You know, with your appearance, you could be mistaken as a mutated human being with a quirk. You can breathe atomic rays like your father and have the power over electricity like Ghidorah. But most importantly, you could reincarnate yourself should your old form, which is what you are now, and transform into your titan self. Mothra said, as she let Izuku think about this. Wait, so you mean that I am effectively immortal? Izuku asked, as Mothra looked at him. Not exactly. Should your egg, if you lay one nearby, be destroyed, you will die, but it will take almost 100 years before you could reincarnate with your powers. Mothra said, as Izuku nodded his head. We will be getting you to learn how to fight with your titan form as well as human form to be completely prepared for your first year as a hero student. But above all else, you will need to hold yourself back in order to make sure that you don't kill anyone on accident. This training you will be doing will increase your base power and strength with your current abilities and bring them higher than ever. Godzilla said, as Izuku nodded. I need to get stronger so that I can become a hero for everyone. I will bring smiles to people's faces just like All Might did. But I won't tell someone that their dreams are unattainable or tell them to be realistic. I will encourage them to become heroes even if the people around them tell them not to. Izuku declared as Godzilla got into a fighting stance. Then get prepared for 5 months of pure torture, because by the end of these 5 months you will be as strong as I was at your age when I was in the Hollow Earth battling for supremacy against the Kongs. Godzilla said, rushing his son. Over the last 5 months, Izuku had been training in order to become a hero at UA. He had also been getting abilities to be added to his repertoire from Mothra. He was walking around the lost city of Atlantis when a submarine entered the area and humans were making their way through it. Thinking quickly, Izuku entered his titan form as he hid from them. He had no clue as to who or what they were or why they were here, but he needed to be hidden from them. From what the radiation signal is stating, there was a smaller life form within the chambers that Godzilla lives and sleeps in. An old voice called out. Are you sure, Rick? Last time I checked, Godzilla was highly territorial, especially to us. A female voice called out. It was here that Izuku revealed himself as he stomped over to them as he had grown to be as tall as Godzilla was in the 1950s at around 50 meters tall. They all stared at him with confusion before stating something that was correct on all fronts. Did he have a child? They all screamed. They all started to slowly but surely move away from Izuku as he moved closer to them on all fours. This is a discovery of a lifetime. We need to talk to Dr. Serizawa about this. He will be happy to find out that Godzilla has been procreating a newer version of his species. The female said, as Izuku got annoyed as he grabbed the woman softly. As he lifted her to his eyes, she couldn't help but notice how curious he was about her as well as how expressive they were. They also seemed to have another form in them as she got a closer look and took a picture. "See, could you put me down, little Ghidorah?" she asked, concerned for her safety. Izuku, being the nice person that he was, placed her down softly as he moved along with them, getting on all fours and lowering himself to their height. What do you think he's doing?" one of the men asked, as Izuku stared at them expectantly. I think he wishes to give us a ride," one of the scientist men said, as he climbed on top of Izuku's back holding onto his spines. The others had then grabbed onto his spines and activated their pressurized suits in order to protect themselves from the pressures of the ocean water. They had also taken to heart that this Godzilla child had gills on his neck as well, same as his father. They were pleasantly surprised to find out that they were being swam out of the radiation-filled area and back to the surface. Once the Monarch station that was there had noticed his presence, they had prepared for another Ghidorah situation but found that to be impossible since Izuku was the only one there with their people. A man came out of the massive station as he had a shocked look on his face as the people and woman walked over to the man. What is this? How did Godzilla have another version of his species?" the man asked, almost hysterically laughing. "It is as you said, sir, he managed to have a child with Mothra," the woman said, as Izuku huffed in his Titan form as he rose up to be at their eyesight level on the station. Looking at his presence, the man who arrived on the scene walked over to Izuku's face as he could remember what Godzilla looked like in his heyday. "Look at you, are you the child of Godzilla and Mothra?" he asked, curiously as Izuku nodded. "Why, you can understand us?" he asked, bewildered. Another nod confirmed his suspicions as the man stared at him concerned. Izuku, thinking nothing of what he was going to do, connected his mind to that of the man as he felt a tingle down his spine as Izuku's eyes glowed. "Are you Dr. Serizawa?" Izuku asked, as the man looked floored as he looked at everyone else. "Are you talking to me, little Goji?" the man asked and received a nod. "I am Dr. Ishiro Serizawa, and I am the director of Monarch. I hope to know what happened to such a being like you to be born," the man asked. "My name is Midoriya Izuku, or I should say Gosura. I am the child of Godzilla and Mothra. Sorry, I have an identity crisis whenever I am in this form. But I am Izuku Midoriya. As a human, I was born human but entered a rite of reincarnation because I had Gaia's gift within my body," Izuku said, as the man looked at him confused. "Your name is Gosura, a mix of Godzilla Ghidorah and Mothra Mosura Magnificent. A mix between different breeds," Serizawa said, as he laughed before running off. Tearing the connection with him and the giant Titan behind him in the process, he made his way into the building inside the station to add a new Titan on the charts of others. "I think that you just made his day there," the woman said, as she stared at Izuku's confused expression. "My name is Vivian Graham, and I am Serizawa's second in command of Monarch. It's nice to meet you, little Goji," she said, as she held out a left hand. Izuku pointed his finger at her as she gripped it tightly as she tried to shake it only to be lifted off the ground as Izuku shook hers. After a large amount of clicks as well as groans, Izuku had to leave since he could feel his father's presence calling him back to Atlantis. As soon as he disappeared from the area, Monarch had gotten together in order to keep an eye on the young Titan as he traversed through the waters. "I can only hope that this youngster can become an even better Godzilla than his father," Serizawa stated, as he stared at the number of Ghidorahs he had placed on his wall, that only being 3 that he could place. "Dagon, Godzilla himself, and Izuku. Smiling to himself, he gears himself up to head to Japan in order to tell the Japanese government about what happened to the missing boy Midoriya Izuku. The whole way there, Izuku was struggling with keeping his mentality correct as he was trying to not let either personality of his Titan form and human form get the better of the other. As soon as he arrived in Atlantis, he transformed back into his humanoid form as his father walked over to him in his Titan form. Izuku stood up as tall as he could from where he was as his hair was ruffled by the big G-man. Said man was picking Izuku up now as he was about to get a massive quantity of radiation to eat from the earth. Once that was completed, Godzilla had looked to his son as he made a face that meant that something was wrong. "What is wrong?" Izuku asked, as Ghidorah stared him in the eye. "You need to find your champion," Ghidorah said. "You entrance exams." About 5 hours later, since it was around 5 o'clock in the morning at the beach, Izuku had made landfall as he transformed into his human form. Looking at his reflection, Izuku saw that his eyes gained a hue of blue and orange within his jade-colored eyes. His hair had still been messy like usual, but it gained some blue tips at the edge of his forest green color. He walked over to the steps as he made his way towards the school of his dreams before he became a Titan. He wouldn't need to rely on food as much nowadays since he could consume radiation in order to survive, but that didn't matter to him. He had an entrance exam to win as well as pass in order to learn how to become a hero. When he arrived to the school in question, Izuku saw that the sun was now up high in the air as it placed a beam of light over the school. "This is the first step I have to become a hero," Izuku said, as a gruff and angry voice called out behind him. "Watch it, lizard face." As Izuku froze for a minute-second, he turned to look at the boy who he hadn't heard in about 10 months. The boy was revealed to be blonde-haired as well as ruby-eyed young man who had a sneer on his face as he looked at Izuku. "So, what are you doing here, Deku?" the boy asked, as Izuku visibly shook a little before shaking his head. "Whoever gets the most points, has to buy the other's lunch," Izuku said, holding his hand out. From the boy's view, Izuku had changed from a timid boy who was trembling in his presence alone, but the boy in front of him now had the backbone that he had tried to pull out of him for years. "About DMN time you grew a backbone, Deku, but at least make sure you can keep your promises. I thought you were quirkless," the boy said, rather mellowly. "I became a Titan because of the energy I somehow absorbed from Godzilla and Ghidorah, Kaken," Izuku said, as Kaken nodded his head. "Well, I will show you why you are a useless Deku. And make sure to rub it in your face by then as well," Kaken said, as Izuku sighed in relief. From the last time they had talked to one another, they had been polar opposites, and Kaken had been wishing to attack him at any moment. After a few minutes of waiting for the entrance exam's written portion to begin, Izuku was writing answers for the test. It wasn't until around 30 minutes later that Izuku had finished the test as he left the room, leaving his test on his desk since the teacher had noticed his movement stopped. Izuku entered a room with some other examinees as they waited for the proctor of the exam to talk about the practical portion of the test. About 25 minutes after everyone was gathered into the auditorium, a man with raised blonde hair and shades covering his eyes stepped up to the podium. "Hello everyone. And welcome to UA Academy. Can I get a yeah?" he called out and placed a hand over his ear. Silence reigned over the auditorium as the man shuddered at how quiet it was. "You are no joke. Well, let's start on explaining the rules to the entrance exams. Are you ready?" he asked in complete hyping of the explanation. He got silence once more as Izuku in his seat started to gush about how the man on the stage is Present Mic as well as how he used to listen to his talk show every Friday night. Kaken had promptly told him to shut up, and as soon as he quieted down, Present Mic began to talk about the 1 to 3-pointer robots in quick succession. "Excuse me. I have a question." A navy blue-haired boy with a ramrod straight stance yelled out, raising his hand. "What can I do for you, examinee? Present Mic called out. "On the pamphlet here, it clearly states that there are 4 robots that we have to defeat, but you have only talked about the previous 3. If this is a mistake on behalf of UA's information department, then that is highly disrespectful of a building to do that. The young man said, as Present Mike placated him. Alright, don't get your panties in a bunch. Examinee number 7111, that is the 0-pointer. It is worth exactly as it is called. 0 points. Zilch, nada. That is basically a thwomp from Super Mario Bros. It is a mere obstacle, as well as if you attack it you will lose all your points. Present Mike called back to the student. Thank you for your answer. Now as for you, the one with forest messy hair. If you are only here to gush about heroes, then you should leave. We do not need your incessant muttering to distract us from trying to pass the test. The boy said, as Izuku clamped his mouth shut as Kaken laughed from afar. Alright, cool your jets there, examinee # now that is all I have to say other than this one phrase. As Napoleon once said, true heroes are capable of overcoming all obstacles. And with that I will leave you with our school's motto. Plus ultra. Present Mike called out, as Izuku moved out towards the area he was going to be at. At the arena that he was going to attend, Izuku stood off to the side as he stretched his body out and cracking some bones that needed to be popped. As soon as he gained a feral smirk on his face, he watched as the doors began to open up as Present Mike got ready to start the countdown. But as soon as the doors were completely opened, Izuku ran off as some of the other students made similar comments about how he would be disqualified for going before the sound went off. But as Present Mike didn't start the countdown, a brown-haired girl, examinee number 7111, and a couple of others followed Izuku's example as they went into the arena to take down bots. It wasn't much longer when the other students were told that there was no goes for fighting villains and told them all to get points before there isn't any more to collect. With all the other students running into the city now to get points, Izuku was seen running around and beating down robots with his base strength as he trashed any that came up to him. His dorsal plates on his back were pulsating as they were showing his intimidation display. That makes my 20th point. Izuku said, destroying a 2-pointer. Within a monitor room, a group of judges were watching a few cameras placed in each zone as they watched the children fight the robots. It seems like we have a great CRP this year. A woman said, as she liked her lips. That boy with the dorsal plates, is he who we're supposed to keep an eye on? A man with an excavator helmet over his head asked. Yes, he is the son of the king of the monsters. We are to make sure that he doesn't fall to villainy. But at the same time, we are supposed to make sure that he can pass the overall exam. A small rodent-like creature said, smiling. The other cameras had shown other applicants who were showing their prowess in fighting the bots as they took them down each. Hell, there was an invisible girl who was taking down some of the robots by turning them off with her invisibility being a really good advantage. How long has it been since the exam had started? A sickly-looking man asked. It's been exactly about 7 minutes. Let's send out the 0-pointers. A scraggly-haired man said, as the creature who was watching with them pushed the button. Izuku was having a blast at the moment. He had saved a few people from decisions that would have gotten them hurt, but at the same time he was destroying these bots without issues. He was really glad to have Godzilla's anatomy for destruction since he was really able to let loose without training with his dad. It was here that he gained his 79th point, and the ground started to rumble and shake as if there was an earthquake. Well, if it isn't a problem. I should see if there is anyone who needs help. Izuku said, as he ran towards the main street of the arena. He saw a bunch of people running about as they were fleeing from the massive gargantuan robot that was destroying buildings. Izuku began to walk towards the massive robot with a smirk on his face as his alpha instincts were beginning to declare that he needed to make it submit. Moving forwards, he noticed how there was a girl who was about to be crushed by rubble and he moved as fast as he could, and as the girl noticed the rocks above her, she covered her head waiting for something to land on her. When nothing did, she opened her eyes and saw a massive creature standing above her and holding the rocks above her body. Placing the rocks over to the right, he gave her a nod as the girl ran away from the location as Izuku's transformed state showed how appealing his dorsal plates were on his back. Glowing with each plate, from his tail to his head, Izuku moved towards the robot intent on fully destroying it. The robot had only managed to reach up to his upper thigh in terms of height, and he was only around 99 meters tall. Izuku grabbed the metal robot as his tail began to glow from the plates there and began to make a thrumming sound. The sound got louder and louder as Izuku's body began to glow green in color as if to show that he was about to use an attack that would be devastating. If that wasn't enough, the zero-pointer was calling for backup since it was identifying Izuku as such a massive threat that it wished for backup to take him down. But just before the last mayday call for the robot was about to be sent out, Izuku held the robot by its face and lifted it to stare him in the eyes as he tossed it in the air and released his breath towards it. The thrumming came to a halt as he released his built-up power and smashed it into the robot, sending it high in the air as it was pushed higher and higher into orbit. Everyone in each and every arena were looking at the sky as well as Izuku's general direction as they watched a zero-pointer be completely obliterated and tossed into the atmosphere. As soon as the beam of green light had dissipated, Izuku stood over a small hill of dead robots as he roared out into the heavens. As he shook his head, he started to lower his body to the ground as he started to glow green again, causing everyone to run away thinking that he would attack them. But as soon as the green glow ended, Izuku was revealed in his human form as he shook his body as multiple sections of his body was covered in ash as well as dust. It was here that the exams were ended as Izuku made his way over to the girl he had saved from the rocks. When she saw him, she ran over to make sure that he was alright, but that was when she noticed his dorsal plates on his back. Why you're Godzilla? She called out fearfully. And no. I'm not him. I shoot. I am sort of his adopted son. Izuku asked, as the girl stared at him for a moment before promptly passing out. The others around him stared at him as Izuku picked the girl up and moved to get her to Recovery Girl, thinking that she was in need of some healing. Alright children, let me take a look at your injuries. Come on, I don't have all day. Recovery Girl called out, as she kissed and moved on from person to person. As soon as she came up to Izuku and the sleeping girl, Izuku placed her on the ground as he told her what happened as the woman just sighed. She passed out from quirk exhaustion, as well as too much information. I will need some help getting her to the infirmary, Sonny. Recovery Girl said, as Izuku picked the girl up from the ground and followed the old woman to her office. As soon as the trio had entered the room, Recovery Girl gave Izuku some gummies as she told him to prepare for a letter to come to his home. I don't exactly have a home. See, could you send it to the Monarch base on the ocean at this exact location? Izuku asked, using a map to point in its general location. I could get Nizu to do that, yes. I hope to never see you in my office in the future. She said, as Izuku looked a little glum now. I don't think that is possible. Izuku said, as he moved towards the door. Why would you think that, Sonny? She asked, as Izuku told her about what he did to the zero-pointer. Well, if it makes you feel better, I think you were a hero to the few people who you assisted. She said, smiling at him. He only returned a sad smile before leaving through the door as he walked down the hallways. It wasn't long until he left that the girl woke up as she felt extremely warm. What happened? She asked. Izuku had been so sullen that he forgot to go with that dinner with Kaken as he left the school grounds. First day of UA. It was about 3 years before Izuku was entering the world of the Titans that he can see himself in this dream. He was walking to school, and it was around the first day of school for his first year of middle school. He had been minding his own business as he entered the school gates as he prepared for his day. He was walking through the halls as he made his way towards his classroom for the next year, and as entering the room he heard the distinct sounds of crackling pops right behind himself. Turning around, he was soon face to face with Kaken as the young man stared him down with a fury that was borderlining on villainous actions about to be done. What the hell are you doing here, Deku? Kaken asked, as Izuku stared at him in fear. Just heading to class S, Izuku said, stepping back away from the boy in clear fear. I was supposed to come to this worthless school and leave it to enter UA, why are you constantly following me? Kaken called out, attacking Izuku. Izuku was smashed in the stomach as he was sent flying across the room and smacked into the wall behind himself as he grabbed his stomach. A girl ran over to him to make sure he was all right and looked at his pained expression. "Are you all right?" she asked, as Izuku looked up. She had long black hair that was stylized like midnight as she stared at him with cerulean-colored orbs. Unknown to her, behind her, Kaken was rearing an arm back to explode her back for helping him. Izuku pushed her out of the way as the searing hot pain of an explosion of nitroglycerin like sweat impacting his form and exploding. Jaya! Izuku screamed as he flinched from his dreams and landed on the ground. Izuku moved towards the ocean water as he felt the phantom pain of his chest burning as he transformed into his Titan form. He swam towards the surface of the ocean where the Monarch base was located on the ocean when one of the scientists had run over to the edge where Izuku was located and helped him up. "Are you all right, Izuku?" the scientist asked, concerned. Izuku looked up and found her wearing a scientist-similar garb as well as long appealing blonde hair with glasses that made her eyes stand out. Sorry, I didn't mean to cause any harm," Izuku mumbled as he rubbed his chest. The woman pulled him towards the infirmary as she started to work on his burn scar that was still flaring up. She had been told about his past as well as who made the burns, and she had been his primary doctor ever since. Her name was Melissa Shield. She had a knack for building and crafting support gear for heroes but made a minor in getting a doctor's degree. She placed some burn cream on his chest as she helped him place the bandages over his chest. She had known him for about a few months now as she was near his age range enough to care for him. Izuku whimpered as the memories of that traumatizing event in his life had caused him to sort of relapse as he was trying to get the memory to subside. Another scientist had entered the room to find him being cared for by Melissa as they cooed softly. "I came here to ask why he was here, but now I see why," Vivian said, smiling sadly. Burn's scar had been burning in his sleep. He was having a memory of a past event that happened in school. Melissa said, as Izuku nodded, whimpering still. "Don't worry, that young man can't hurt you anymore," Vivian said, as she smiled at him. "Now you have a first day of school to go to. You are in Class 1A. Since you won the entrance exams of the year," Vivian said, smiling at him. How did I pass? I was sure that my points were redacted since I had destroyed the zero-pointer," Izuku said, as the woman giggled softly. "Only you can be this one-dimensional in terms of heroism. You silly goose, you didn't lose any points. In fact, that zero-pointer was worth 60 points all on its own," Melissa said, giggling. "Oh, so what time should I be heading over to the school?" Izuku asked, as the two girls stared at him. "It's already around 6:30, you have about an hour to get there if you move it," Vivian said, as Izuku got up and moved away to head to school. "Thank you all, especially you, Mel," Izuku said, as Melissa nodded. Izuku was now entering the beach of Dagobah as he was moving about the cleared beach. He had noticed that a small group of people were cleaning it up and he smiled every time he saw the clean beach. But now was not the time for reminiscing, he had to get to school before he was too late. Changing back to his human form, he moved towards the street and revealed that he fit the human suit and tie for the school uniform perfectly. He was walking towards the school when he overheard a sound coming from behind him and found a young girl with brown hair moving towards him with a speed he had only seen from All Might and Ingenium. "Hey! Are you Godzilla's little brother?" she yelled as she finally caught up to him. No. I'm his son," Izuku said, confused as well as concerned. "Well, it's nice to meet you. I'm Ochako Uraraka. Thank you for saving me at the entrance exams," Uraraka said, smiling at him. "It's nothing. You don't have to repay me if that is what you're thinking. I just did what any hero should do, nothing more, nothing less," Izuku said, as they both entered the school grounds. They arrived at the door to their class really fast, especially since Uraraka had been riding on his tail during the walk. She had gotten tired out since she had sprinted all the way there and was needing a break. Izuku had been a little miffed when she used his tail as a rest stop, but he didn't mind. Entering the classroom, they were bombarded with the navy-haired boy yelling at Kaken as if he was offending him. For the last time, take your feet off the desk. It will be seen as disrespecting the people and teachers who spent their time to creating it. The boy said as he chopped his hand in the air. What are you, an elitist? What school did you come from? Kaken asked, as Izuku became very worried. Let me reintroduce myself. I am Ida Tenya from Semi-Private Academy. Ida Tenya introduced himself. Bakugo Katsuki, and I am going to enjoy beating you into the ground. Kaken said, as he growled at the boy. Beat me. Hey, are you sure that you belong in this conglomerate of a school? Ida called out, before Izuku coughed, suddenly gaining their attention. DKU. Bakugo growled. Sorry about interrupting, geez, how do I talk to people again? Izuku mumbled to himself as Ochako got off his tail. Hello there, my name is Ida Tenya. Ida began to speak as Izuku interrupted him again. Sorry for the interruption, but I should probably get to my seat because the teacher is here, and my name is Midoriya Izuku. Nice to meet you, Ida. And I already heard you speaking to Kac Bakugo. Izuku said, as he walked over to his seat. I'm surprised that you noticed my presence. Well, at least I don't have to reveal myself for another minute and a half. My name is Shoyuta Aizawa, and I will be your homeroom teacher for the next 3 years. I'm sure that you have things you want to be doing at the start of the year, but put these on and meet me outside. Aizawa said, as he walked out of the room and entered his cocoon of a sleeping bag and rolled away. I think he just reminded me that I should get Scylla a new sleeping bag. I wonder if he would allow me to know where he gets that. Izuku mumbled as the others looked at him horrified. As the class were standing outside, the teacher made a remark about how they took about close to 35 seconds and that he would work on that in the future. Midoriya, you scored first in the entrance exams. What was the furthest you could throw a ball in middle school? Aizawa asked, looking at the titan of a boy. Last I checked up about 35 meters, sir. Izuku said, looking down. Before you became a titan or after? The man asked, looking at him with a deadpan expression. Before. Izuku said, curtly. Well, make sure to use your quirk. And make sure that you don't leave the circle. Aizawa said, as he tossed Izuku a ball. Wait, he got first. All the members of the class called out. Izuku moved into the circle as he wrapped his tail around his legs in order to keep it within the circle. I will place all my strength into this, and make sure that I don't break any glass nearby. Izuku thought to himself as he remembered what his teacher said. By the way, Aizawa-sensei, I don't have a quirk. Izuku screamed out the last word as the ball flew out of his hand and off in the distance. Multiple shockwaves of wind were blown at everyone as they held onto each other in order to keep themselves from being blown away. Alright, you all need to know where your estimates are really at when using your quirks. The system thinks that it can still believe that all men are treated equally, but they are just holding off on it. This will test your true strengths at the use of your quirks as well as how to improve them. Aizawa said, as he revealed Izuku's number. It was revealed to be around 50,000 meters away from them. Holy SHT. 50,000 meters. How are we supposed to compete with that? An electric blonde-haired boy called out. How the hell does Deku have a quirk? He was quirkless all his life. I will show him the place he deserves to be at my feet. Katsuki growled at Izuku's returning form. Well, let's get this started. Moving on from that demonstration is the 50-meter dash. Aizawa said, before someone opened their big mouth. If that is how this is going to be, this will be a lot of fun. A pink-skinned and haired girl said, jumping around. Fun, you say? Aizawa said, looking at the students who looked at him in slight fear, minus Izuku. Well, if you think that this will be fun, how about this little challenge for you all to complete? If you all don't take this as seriously as possible, I will expel the one person who is in last place. And you will have to leave the school in order to find a new school to go to. Aizawa said, as Uraraka called him out. Why, you can't just do that. We just got here. We worked really hard to get to where we are, that isn't fair. Ochako said, looking at the teacher. And what about disasters? Landslides, tornadoes, hurricanes, etc. You all are training to become heroes, and I have 3 years to make sure that you last longer than most heroes out there today. If you don't pass this test, you will be expelled. End of discussion. Aizawa said, as everyone moved over to the next test. The tests for the quirk apprehension test went smoothly, if you could call it that. Everyone was doing their best to get top scores as well as not be outed as expelled. Izuku was doing fairly well as he was getting constant top 3s on the leaderboards in terms of control as well as power. The main reason he wasn't getting the top scores was because of the fact that he would be slower in his Titan form, since that caused his mind to nearly break every time he became it, since there was a personality shift each time. He got second place on the 50-meter dash, second on the grip, third on the sideways jumps, third in the crunches, first in the push-ups, and third place consecutively for the last 3 events. It was here that their teacher looked over at them as he gave the scores for those on the leaderboards. Izuku was placed in third place as Aizawa talked about not going over each and every student so that he doesn't get a headache from reading so much. But as soon as that was stated, Izuku moved closer to the girls as he covered them all with his tail defensively. He didn't know why he did that, but it felt right to block them away from the little bstrd as he attempted to jump at the tallest girl in the class with grabby hands. But as soon as he was close to the woman, she began to create something before the boy was grabbed by a clawed hand. Everyone looked over to see what grabbed the boy, only to see Izuku's jade eyes glowing a vibrant orange as he stared the little bstrd in the eye. You will take your expelling with dignity and leave without being told to. When the teacher said that he was going to expel someone, he wasn't lying. Izuku said, as he held the boy in the air. Right as I said, Midoriya. But please don't do my job for me, Mineta. Leave the area and never come back again. I will be placing a black mark on your file for attempted SXL SLT. Aizawa said, as Mineta ran off crying about telling his parents about this. As soon as the boy was out of earshot, Izuku's eyes became jade-colored once more as he turned to his class and apologized for the over-the-top attitude. Don't worry, he was making comments about our bodies the entire time. Ochako said, as some of the other girls nodded their heads in agreement. Izuku followed the rest of the class at the rear in order to prevent anyone else from peeping on the girls as they made their way over to the locker rooms. But it was here that Izuku smelled the little pissant who was hiding inside the locker rooms as Izuku called the girls out. Girls! Izuku yelled, gaining their attention. What is it, Midoriya-san? The tall girl asked, concerned. I'm sorry for how this sounds, but I need to enter the room really quick. There is a pissant who should have left by now and they're hiding. Izuku growled at the door, as the girls nodded and moved out of the way. Izuku continued to smell for the pungent odor that he was catching and followed it to Ochako's locker, and he gripped the locker door and pulled it off the hinges, causing a loud shriek to be heard within. While the girls on the outside could hear the shriek, they overheard the sounds of thrumming from inside the room and went to investigate the issue. They all saw Izuku cornering Mineta with his dorsal plates thrumming with power as he growled at the small boy as he said himself. Girls, call Aizawa-sensei. I will keep the little bstrd here. Izuku growled as most of the girls left the room except for Ochako. Looking at her locker, she found white fluid sitting on her uniform as she was completely disgusted with the clothes now. Why you jacked off on my clothes? She screeched, clearly in anger. Izuku, hearing this, was both angered but at the same time confused, since he had never heard of what that phrase jacking off meant in his life. He had learned about the male anatomy in school during health class, but his teacher said that his was completely wrong for being a quirkless, meaning that he was infertile. So he never really had a reason to play with himself, so hearing a new way of saying it caused him confusion, but he kept growling at the boy to keep him still. I was kicked out of the hero course. What did you expect me to do? Just sit there and twiddle my thumbs when I have a whole buffet of appealing women at my beck and call? The little boy screeched. Just for that, I feel like I should atomize you. Women are not for screwing. They are meant to be friends, allies, and maybe even more through building a relationship. They are not. Midoriya, calm down and move away from Mineta. Aizawa said, as Izuku looked at the teacher as he had his eyes red and staring at him. Sure thing, Aizawa-sensei. Can I ask the principal to make sure that Uraraka-san can get a new uniform? Izuku asked, as the teacher nodded his head. With that, Izuku and Ochako left the room and left the diminutive boy to his fate against their teacher. The duo was walking over to the principal's office as Ochako was silent about the encounter of Izuku and the perverted boy in her locker. Hey, thank you for stopping him. If I opened my locker, I probably would have been violated by him when us girls were changing in there. Ochako said, as Izuku looked over at her. She also noticed that one of his eyes had been red in color as he slowly shook his head, getting his anger and fury down enough to speak. And no, it's fine. And anyone else could have noticed his presence in there. Jiro, I think that was her name. The girl with the earphone jacks for ears. Izuku asked the girl as Ochako nodded. She could basically hear his heartbeat as well as breathing if she tried hard enough. I could smell him because of my extremely heightened sense of smell. His smell was so horrible that I had to stay away from him at all times at the tests outside. Izuku explained as she noticed his solemn look. Are you feeling sorry for him? Ochako asked, concerned. It's probably my heroic heart that my mother told me about, but I can't just help but to go seek out to help people with their own problems. It just makes me feel happy when I can save people. I believe that a true hero is someone who will save you no matter what the situation or circumstances are. Izuku said, as they finally arrived at the door. As soon as Izuku was about to knock on the door, it opened up to reveal a somewhat furious man talking to the principal as the said principal's fur was bristling. For the last time, Nizu, you are to expel that dorsal platted brat immediately. The man screamed at the principal. And how many times do I have to tell you, Mr. Mineta, that your son had tried to get his hands on multiple women at my school in just the starting hours of the day? Then when he was expelled for misconduct with the women in his classroom, he hides in Uraraka-san's locker, and as she said herself, jacked off all over her clothes and now wishes to get a new uniform, correct? Nizu asked as he stared at the two new arrivals. Why, yeah. Izuku said, as Ochako nodded her head. Well, the clothes are right next to me. I had a feeling that this would happen, so here you go. Nizu said, as Ochako walked next to the creature of a principal. Thank you, principal, I should get going now. Ochako said, running off in fear. Izuku continued into the room as he closed the door behind himself. Now that Uraraka-san is out of the area, how about we talk about your misconduct, Mr. Mineta-san? Battle training. Izuku woke up from his encounter with rushing to his head. He had been hit with an explosion to the head and his brain was still rattling from the experience and had gifted him with a migraine for it. He had done nothing wrong, but apparently just walking in the same hallway as Kaken had been enough of a wrong for the boy to outright attack in front of teachers. Izuku couldn't trust teachers anymore after that day. He just couldn't trust in them being capable of stopping a fight when it should happen. Izuku had seen Kaken threaten the teachers with excessive force that the teachers just learned to just accept when they wouldn't allow the quirkless child to do anything else. Izuku was on his way back home when he heard the telltale signs of an explosion coming for him from behind, and he tried to dodge the attack as fast as possible. But with the legs of a 9-year-old it was kind of hard. But he had managed to dodge each attack as the other boy was glaring at him with a fury that was on top of the world. What the F did I tell you about dodging my attacks, Deku? The boy screamed at his face. Kaken, see, can you please leave me alone today? Why, you'd already attacked me already. Why, you made your point. Izuku said, screaming back at the boy. Apparently, that wasn't the right choice of words, as the young bomber had launched at him once more and had landed more blows to his chest as well as lower legs. He jumped onto Izuku's 9-year-old frame as he held the boy down with just his weight alone, since Izuku hadn't really spent all that much time to training his body physically. That was when Izuku felt a burning sensation on his lower thigh as well as rear, and Izuku yelped in pain as the burning sensation was massive. Izuku woke up staring at the sky as his old burns on his left thigh and right cheek on his rear started to flare up in pain. Standing up from his small bed, he moved about the area within the radiated entrance to the hollow earth in order to fully awaken himself from his slumber. He had noticed that he was in his Titan form once again as he shook his head as a familiar voice in his head started to speak. "You should tell Dad and Mom about your nightmares. They're becoming too much to bear." A feminine voice called out. "I know, but I can't let them know. They'll try and find Kaken and attempt to kill him," Izuku said, as the feminine voice spoke once more. "I know that you want the best for that boy, but maybe you gave your last olive branch to help him. He has wanted nothing more from you than for you to die. Is that how a friend talks to others?" The voice asked. Mom, I don't know if I can stop sending out olive branches for him to grab. I am trying my best to be as forgiving as possible. I will continue to do so in order to protect him from himself. If he is left to his own devices for too long, villains will take advantage of his mindset," Izuku said, shaking his head. Tears were brimming at his eyes as he shook his head, remembering her voice was nice and all, but it kind of hurt when his mother's voice came out as a voice in his head that was similar to Mothra's thrumming chirps. "I have to go to school. I don't know what we will be doing for that exact class, but I believe that it has something to do with All Might," Izuku said, as he looked at the mirage of his mother as he remembers her best. When he was a 4-year-old and was viewing her as the strongest woman in his world. She was tall and skinny, a slim waist as well as an appealing body, but overall, he just misses how soft her voice was towards him all the time. He entered the ocean waters of the Pacific as he swam towards the sandy beach of Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. As once he landed, he walked over towards the school he went to. When he arrived at the school, he found himself in his seat once more as he started to complete some assignments that were due that day. He knew that he should have done them when he got back home from school, but lately he'd been hearing his mother's voice and it had been distracting him. The classes for school were normal for the second day as they all learned more about English, science, modern art history, and many others. Once it reached the class for hero informatics, the class was brimming with excitement, and Izuku was more mellow about it. He just wishes that it wasn't All Might as a teacher for the class. As soon as the massive man entered the class and started talking about a battle training exercise, Izuku knew that Bakugo was going to see if he could fight him just to beat him down again. "Useless freak, quirkless monster, kill yourself. We don't need you here." Izuku shook those words from his memory as he moved to collect his hero suit as he left the room and entered the changing rooms. He watched as some of the other boys had been changing into their hero costumes as he slowly but surely got into his own. It was a long-sleeved muscle shirt that had padding in the chest area to prevent massive damage to his chest, combat boots that were red in color as well as steel-toed. He had gauntlets around his wrists that increased his overall power in his attacks and steel covering his claws in order to deal more massive damage. Everything except for his shoes were the color of dark green as he left the room and held his utility belt that was yellow in color to pay homage to Eraserhead that was filled with medical supplies and provisions for any kind of hero who he would team up with. As soon as he entered the room where they were going to be watching the test in, he got a good look at his classmates as he noticed a weird aura coming from one of the girls. It was the tall girl as she held a weird aura of a bat-like monster that was similar to his monster mother. It was weird because it was giving him a singing song sound that was attracting him. He kept it to himself as he paid attention to his teacher but talked to Ochako unknown to the look that the tall girl was giving him at the moment. As All Might talked about what they would be doing for the assignment, he talked about how they needed to get inside the villain's base in order to stop a bomb from going off in 10 minutes. Not too hard, but it depended on who he was teamed up with, and he couldn't help but wish to not be teamed up with Kaken. As soon as everyone pulled a ball from the randomizer, he soon found out that he was teamed up with Ochako as she jumped onto his tail as they looked at the teams going up against one another. Alright class, the first teams to go up against one another is Team A consisting of young Bakugo and young Ida. Versus Team D consisting of young Midoriya and young Uraraka. Team A will be the heroes as Team D will be the villains. All Might called out, as Izuku and Ochako left the building with the bomb in tow as they were placing it on one of the roof in order to make sure that the heroes can't find it at all. Once on the roof, Izuku stared at Ochako as he decided to make a plan. "Oi, mufflers. Do you think worthless Deku has a quirk? Katsuki asked, looking at the engine hero student. I don't know, from what he told me was that he didn't have a quirk. But from what he did at the entrance exams he seemed to have a quirk. Ida said, as the young man stared at Bakugo. Whatever, you deal with round face while I deal with worthless Deku. Bakugo said, as he moved towards the building. As he moved about the building after All Might told him that he can go, he looked in each and every room that he came across as he thought about what Izuku had done over the last 10 months. He had told the boy to kill himself in the last year they had at Aldera, and thought he had when the Titans attacked Muzutafu and heard that the Runt and his mother were in the area of the attack. He remembers laughing at how Deku probably kicked the bucket finally and would leave him alone for when he enters UA only to find him there 10 months later. Now he will get some answers about how he developed this quirk of his and force him to use its full force to make sure that he isn't lying about how he never had this power until about 10 months prior to entering UA. Did you get the plan? Izuku asked Ochako, as she nodded her head. Alright, I will do my best to keep Ida and Kabakugo busy. You make some projectiles in order to use against Ida, he won't be able to make sharp turns on this roof. Izuku said, entering the stairwell. Good luck. Ochako called out, as she collected some rocks and pebbles. Alright, time to show Kaken that I am not a worthless Deku. Izuku thought to himself as a mirage appeared behind himself in the form of a green-haired woman looking at him in sadness. Izuku ran through the floors closest to the roof as he ran into Ida as the boy had run to go past him. But just as he ran right next to Izuku they exchanged a look just before Izuku's arm stuck out faster than the boy could perceive and was clotheslined. As the boy flopped to the ground in pain Izuku jumped onto his prone body as he placed the HNDCFFS over his arms holding them in place. Ida has been defeated and is taken from the match. All Might called out from the comms. Izuku knew that taking out Ida was the best way for the match to go in the way he wanted, since Kaken wouldn't try to go for the bomb. All he had to do was keep Bakugo busy in order to keep him from going after his teammate. He arrived around a corner when he saw Bakugo taken by surprise and went to go for an attack on him with an explosive right hook. Izuku changed his anatomy in order to tank the blast as he placed scales all over his body and increased his size in order to intimidate Bakugo. His dorsal plate started to glow and pulsate as he went on the attack in order to keep the bomber busy. He knew that he was strong enough to stop the young man all on his own, it was why he was capable of stopping Ida so fast. Izuku knew Bakugo though, he would use anything necessary in order to win, even Izuku's own knowledge against him. He dodged an explosive left jab that the blonde had thrown at him as he tail swiped the boy across the massive room they were in. Young Bakugo, you have 5 minutes left to get to the bomb. All Might warned. As the fight continued on screen, the black-haired tall girl spoke out to the teacher. All Might, sir, do you think that this fight is a grudge match between the two? The girl asked, curiously. Whatever do you mean, young Yaoyorozu? All Might asked, confused. Well, it seems like Bakugo-kun has been fighting based on a grudge, and Midoriya-san has been fighting him to a standstill when he was more than capable of taking out Ida, who is in a different weight class entirely, with one arm. Do you think Midoriya-san is fighting for a grudge match? Yaoyorozu asked. I wouldn't think so, I heard about his plan. He was going to originally keep both Bakugo Shonen and Ida Shonen busy for the entire 10 minutes before time was called. But now that you think about it, he wasn't even winded from a blow like that to his left arm. All Might muttered. The class continued to watch as Izuku tossed Bakugo around the room like a ragdoll as he finally showed something of a sign of his lowering stamina. He was breathing lightly as Bakugo was breathing heavily. Then there was a ding heard in the room that caught both boys off guard, and Bakugo was smiling ferally. Pointing his gauntlet at Izuku, he started monologuing about how if Izuku knew about his quirk so much, then he should know about what happens when he has a storage tank for his sweat to accumulate. Stop this, Bakugo Shonen. You could kill him. All Might called out, stunning the whole class. He won't die if he dodges. Bakugo called out, releasing the blast. They all watched as Izuku's face became filled with an unexplainable look of fear as they saw his eyes start to dull a little bit before growling even more and moving around the blast as best as he could towards the boy. Needless to say, that what happened next was completely bonkers for the class as Izuku moved through the blast as he kept his eyes closed and stuck his arm through the blast range towards Bakugo's face and grabbed it before slamming the boy to the ground. As soon as the camera's view was blocked by the smoke and debris, they saw something that honestly looked appealing as glowing blue and green lights came from through the smoke and caused it to move away faster to see what happened. As they looked at the screen, they found Izuku standing over Bakugo with an intense look on his face as he stared the boy in his eyes and spoke for the first time to him in the exercise. Can you not think for once in your pathetic life? If you let a blast that loud as well as massive indoors, you could cause the whole building to collapse. Ochako is on the roof with nothing to protect her from falling 19 stories to the ground. You could have killed her. Izuku roared as he was shown to have multiple burns all over his torn body. His hero suit had been reduced to cinders as his body was revealed to everyone in the room watching the fight. There was burned starburst-shaped scars on his lower torso as well as a massive handprint over his left shoulder. But the most important scar that they could see on his body was the massive words displayed over his back from where Izuku screamed at Bakugo that wasn't covered by his dorsal plates. The words clearly stated, "The quirkless wonder quirkless Deku. A worthless hero." As soon as the entire room saw those words, the only things that people could ask was, how the hell did he get that scar? Hero team wins. Class presidents. Rescue training. Hey Kaken, what kind of hero team should we be? Izuku asked, as he sat near his friend on the ground near the playground. We will be Mighty Man and Dynamite. The heroic duo who is smarter, stronger, faster than the number one hero All Might. Kaken said, as he smiled at Izuku. Well, is there a way to start training ourselves without hurting ourselves? Izuku asked as Kaken looked at Izuku. Well, Zukuen, we should probably work on our stamina as well as endurance. That way we can continue fighting for longer against our opponents and villains. Kaken said, smirking. That sounds great. Izuku said, jumping from the ground to start the training. The two would run around the playground as they were training to become heroes as children. The other adults in the area would look at the wonder duo with awe as well as chuckle at their antics. They would also cheer them on whenever they play hero versus villains whenever the teachers joined in playing with the boys and girls. It wasn't until the day that Izuku had gone to go see the doctor that things began to change around him, and he knew it. And Mrs. Aratani, see, can a quirkless person be become a hero? Izuku asked as Mrs. Aratani looked at him. I'm not sure, there hasn't been one since the age of quirks began. I'm sure that whatever you do that you can become a hero. Aratani-sensei said, smiling at Izuku. It was immediately after lunch that the children noticed that Aratani-sensei wasn't present for the rest of the year preceding that question. Izuku woke up with a massive headache. He had been witnessing his oldest memories coming back as he slept during the night. He had no idea what they were trying to tell him, but he knew that they would come to a head soon and that he would have to be ready to fight soon. His alpha senses were moving about the area to search for a possible threat that was near the school only to find reporters moving towards the school. Getting up from his little bed, he noticed that his father and mother were present this time as he snuggled up to them both as he gained a slight purr from both of them before leaving the platform. As he walked around the lost city of Atlantis, he made it to the small puddle of water that seemed more like a puddle than anything linking the hollow earth to the land above. Moving into the water, he swam towards the surface of the above world of the hollow earth as he made his way swimming towards the land where his school was located. It wouldn't be until around 7 a.m. that he would arrive to the school in his uniform as he shook some remaining water from his head as he walked through the reporters as they tried to ask him questions about All Might. As soon as he entered the gate, he noticed that his tail seemed a bit heavier as he noticed some of his classmates hitching a ride on him. Kaminari-san, Ashido-san, why are you sitting on my tail? He asked, as the girl stood up from his tail. I was hiding from the reporters. I didn't want to be stopped from entering the school because of their sound bites. The girl said, happily bouncing from one foot to the other, allowing him and Kaminari-san to watch as her melons bounced with each jump. Shaking his head from the hormonal part of his mind, he walked towards the building where he found Ochako standing near the door happily waiting for him. As he continued into the building with her animatedly talking about what happened in the battle trials, he smiled at her open arms as she explained what happened in each battle. Truth be told, he had watched the battle trials, but he had been sleeping near the end of them since they were becoming more and more boring to him. He wanted to fight a strong opponent soon and would wish that he could meet someone who could match his strength class. He was already showing Scylla that he was a force to be reckoned with all on his own with his Titan form, and his human-Titan hybrid form was at least half the strength of his Titan form fully. Sitting down in his seat behind Kaken, Izuku waited for the teacher to enter the class as the rest of the students in the class had soon arrived and the teacher wasn't far behind. "Hello class, I want to inform you that your training exercises were a good match. Bakugo, don't let your opponent string you on like that, that is how you can lose your life. Midoriya, when you are given an opportunity to defeat your opponent, don't let them continue breathing if it means that you can have a good fight, that is how civilians die. Todoroki, you need to make sure that you tone it down on your quirk usage since you need to use your fire more. Don't even start with me, young man, I will not have any of my students half-butting this class or else you will be placed in general education." Aizawa-sensei said, as all the students nodded their heads as the teacher moved on to other subjects. "Now for the most important part of your time here at UA," Aizawa-sensei said, as he paused for dramatics. "You will have to choose a class president." Aizawa said, as he started to pull out a sleeping bag. "What should we do to choose a class president?" Ida asked, chopping his hand and arm in the air. "I could care less about how it's done, just make sure you have two people acting as class and vice president of the entire 1A class," the man said, before placing himself on the ground to get some much-needed sleep. With Ida talking about doing the vote diplomatically, Izuku focused on the quirks of his classmates as he wrote everything he could about them without doing much of anything. "Well, I think that personally this is good. We have a cinnamon roll as a class president and Yamamoto as the vice would be able to curb his mumbling habit," one of the students said, as Izuku shook his head. "I thank you all for choosing me as the class president, and I can certainly hope that I can live up to your expectations," Izuku said as Momo said, the same thing. As the class went through the main part of the day learning English, modern art history, modern science, and math, they had been too busy to notice some movement outside the gates as one of the people stared at Izuku intently. "Only a matter of time," the hooded man said, walking away. Izuku was sitting at his seat as he had a small flask of radiation that he placed near his mouth to drink up for himself in order to keep himself going. He had been listening to his classmates talk about the history of each other's families that he had spent his time looking out the window with a smile on his face as he saw the clear skies. "I wonder how the meetings with the other class presidents and their vice presidents are going to be like," Momo asked, as Izuku looked over at her. "It will mainly talk about what we will be doing during the build-up to the sports festival as well as the grading of class papers. We are basically taking desk jobs for free and helping the teachers lower the workload on themselves," Izuku said, as he yawned. "Not get much sleep last night?" Ochako asked, looking at him. "No, just some weird memories are coming back to me. Been happening since the first day of school actually, probably nothing," Izuku said, as he grumbled about getting more sleep. Brr brr brr, intruder alert. Please form an orderly line and go outside to line up with your class. Intruder alert. Izuku noticed that the alarm was going off in the room as Ida grabbed the arm of an upperclassman as he asked what was happening. Their answer was that the school's been infiltrated and that the place hadn't been infiltrated in the entire time they had been there. Taking his classmates' safety into his hands, Izuku called his classmates over to him as he allowed them to climb onto his tail as he made sure that they were safe from any and all harm. Through the pushing and shoving, Ida had noticed that it was just the press as Izuku nodded at the boy as he called out the students of the school about how it was only the press and that they should conduct themselves in an orderly manner. After clearing out the hallways, the students of Class 1A had arrived at their homeroom in order to know what they were doing for Hero Informatics. It was here that their teacher had entered the classroom as he informed them about a trip that would be happening in a couple of days to do their rescue training. But for the day they would be training in quirkless combat. As the class got their gym uniforms on and headed outside to train with one another, Izuku had teamed up with Ochako and Tsuyu as the two girls needed the training of fighting really badly. The training was brutal for the girls as Izuku held back a lot of his strength so that he wouldn't kill them, just bruise them slightly. The girls were thankful for the training as Izuku had been teaching them at the same time about how to launch a punch at someone as well as the weak spots to hit a villain at in order to incapacitate them fast. It was here that Izuku's phone went off as he looked at the hero news and saw that his parents were battling Ghidorah again as the monster was trying to defeat them both once more. I guess my home is going to be lonely again. Izuku mumbled to himself unknowing of the girls hearing that. Where do you live, Midori? Ashido asked, curiously. I live at the bottom of the ocean. In the lost city of Atlantis. Izuku said, looking at them for a moment. Your home is the lost city of Atlantis. The whole class yelled. I mean yeah. Monarch has one of their massive stations just outside the hole heading towards it. Izuku said, as the class asked to be brought there. As much as I would love to bring you all there I can't. Izuku said, as Momo and Ochako looked at him confused. Why not? Momo asked, as Izuku gave her a deadpanning look. It's filled to the brim of radiation. You all would die from the power the place radiates alone, the human body cannot handle the place. Izuku said, as they looked at him. I was absorbing the power of both Godzilla's and Ghidorah's power attacks. I was able to continue to absorb the power making me incapable of dying. That's different. Izuku said, as the class collectively said drats. It had been a couple of days since the announcement of the rescue training as the class had gotten onto the bus in order to head there. It was a field trip for the class to learn how to be a real hero on the field just from the building they were going to learn it from. The teacher stationed there will be a high-ranking rescue heroine who had been in that portion of the business for years. They all arrived within about 2 hours at the building as it was shaped like a massive dome of glass. Well class, this is the place, get out and wait for the teacher to appear. Aizawa-sensei said, as the class moved towards the building. It was here that the heroine that Aizawa-sensei told them about walked into view as they were smiling with their eyes. Hello students. I am sure you all know who I am, but I am the space heroine, 13. The heroine said, as the class started to mumble about her quirk as well as hero status with Ochako being very vocal about it. There might be a few things you all need to learn about your quirks. It is that not all quirks are just for show, some of them are extremely dangerous since you learned that from the battle trials. But if you all know about my quirk, it is a black hole that I can summon and displace at will. But with how powerful as well as the amount of people I had saved with it, it is just as easily capable of killing those very same people if I am not careful. I want you all to learn from this experience of rescue training and know that not everyone will be capable of being saved. You will lose the lives of the civilians you are saving. That is all I have to say about that part of the information. 13 said, as Aizawa-sensei walked over. Where is All Might? The man asked, as the heroine pulled up 3 fingers that immediately got Izuku to think about the day All Might crushed his dreams. Can a quirkless person like me be capable of saving people with a smile like you? A 10-month younger Izuku asked All Might. You asked me if a quirkless person, someone who is without power, can become a hero. As much as I would love to tell you that you should try, I can't in good conscience tell you to become a hero. You could become a doctor or police officer, they get CRP for not saving the people that heroes do and get a lot of flack for it, but it's a really good job to get. But you need to remember to be realistic. I'm sorry that I am the one to tell you this, young man. My words have consequences, and if I sent you out there as a new hero you would only die. The man said, before walking down the stairs. As soon as the memory was gone, Izuku shook his head more as he walked with his class that had started to walk away. They entered the building as they stood in awe of the areas that were created for their training, and they were all pumped for the rescue training to begin. It was here that the lights of the building started to flicker and Izuku's dorsal plates began to spasm out of control as he growled. "Midoriya, what are you doing?" Aizawa asked, a little concerned. "We're about to be attacked. My instincts are telling me to fight whatever is here," Izuku said, looking at his teacher. "You will all leave immediately, and whoever Aizawa couldn't finish his sentence as a massive portal appeared in the plaza. It was large and purple in appearance as a hand was coming through and pulled it apart, revealing a villain who had hands all over his body as more and more villains started to swarm the plaza. As soon as all the villains had appeared in the area, they all stared at the seemingly terrified students as the hands villain noticed Izuku's glowing dorsal plates. "We will be taking that titan from you, heroes like you don't deserve a pet like them," the hands villain said, as his second-in-command disappeared as Aizawa went to fight the villains. As the students and Izuku were retreating towards the entrance of the dome, the second-in-command villain appeared in front of them. "I apologize for the interruption of a sure-to-be-rescue training session. But we are the League of Villains, and we are here to kill All Might," the misty villain said. "USJ attack. I apologize for the interruption of a sure-to-be-rescue training class. But we villains are here for the fall of the number one hero, All Might," the villain said, as he loomed over the class. As Izuku stared at the villain, he noticed how the said villain had a small weak spot that he was able to find, and just as he was about to move forward, Katsuki had started to fight with the villain. Using the blonde bomber's attack as a distraction, Izuku ran over to the door whilst holding Ida with his tail and pulled him towards the door, and with a feat of strength that the engine boy couldn't understand yanked the doors enough on his own and tossed him out. "If you want to use your speed for something, Ida-san, you must use it to get our teachers," Izuku said, closing the door. As Ida was sitting there thinking about why Izuku had done that, they ultimately decided to just head out and find their teachers and get help. With the rest of the heroes present, they'd be capable of stopping the villains for sure, so while Ida was running away, Izuku noticed how the villain was about to release his attack on 13 from behind and charged an atomic blast for the villain. As soon as 13 felt her back begin to open up from her own quirk, a blast had passed by her black hole and sent the villain down towards the door. Looking over where Izuku was, she found his dorsal plates thrumming with power as he stomped over to the villain and stepped on his chest. As the villain was struggling to get the boy off of him, 13 used this time in order to get the rest of the students towards the door to evacuate. "Midoriya, the rest of the students are out of there. We need to leave now," 13 called out, as Izuku looked over at her. "I'm sorry," the boy said, before using his surprising amount of speed to slam the doors shut. Locked inside the building with the mist villain getting back up, Izuku stared the villain down as his emerald eyes began to thrum with an energy unknown to him. "You are willing to sacrifice yourself and your safety for your classmates?" the villain asked, stunned. "I am the next in line for the king of the monsters. I will not be defeated by low-class trash," Izuku said, as he attacked the villain quickly. While Izuku was fighting the mist villain, Aizawa was defeating villain after villain that was in the plaza, and he was keeping an eye on the blue-haired individual who had hands all over his body. "Eraserhead is so cool, I can't believe that you are taking down my mobs. You really are a small mini-boss." "Whatever, Nomu beat him," the hand villain said, as the last thing Aizawa had heard was the stomping of the ground behind him and a fist being smashed into the back of his head, bringing his world into darkness. Izuku had sent the villain flying towards the plaza in time to see a monster smash his teacher into the ground. "Aizawa-sensei," the boy called out, following the villain to his teacher. As soon as he made it to the bottom of the stairs, he punched the creature holding his teacher in place and it was sent flying in the distance. "How did you manage to hit it?" Aizawa asked, as Izuku told him about his upgraded DNA. "Well, at least you can handle yourself. What happened to the rest of the class?" the man asked as he sighed, trying to get some breath back. "Class is outside the USJ, Ida had run off to get the teachers on my order. I stayed back here to make sure that we didn't lose our teacher in our first year," Izuku said, standing in front of him. "What do you think you can do against these people? You are only a student," Aizawa scolded Izuku. Looking back at his teacher, Izuku showed the man his evolving eyes as he turned back towards the screaming villain man-child as he was running towards them with fury. Using his tail to swipe the villain away from him, the mist villain had used a portal to take the man-child and have him reappear above him as the villain slammed his hand on Izuku's back. The slap caused Izuku to look back at him with an unamused expression as the young man stared in shock as his quirk wasn't working on his body. How? My quirk won't work on you. The man-child complained. I guess you need to know something, man-child. I am the son of the king of the monsters, and a puny quirk like yours won't even do a bit of damage to me. The only ones who can even come close to damaging me, is either your Nomu, or another titan. Izuku said, as he grabbed the young man and threw him at the other villain too fast to be caught. As they both tumbled to the ground, Izuku smirked at both of them as he focused his eyes on the Nomu as it moved in the way to prevent any more damage to the two leading villains. Aizawa-sensei, I will take care of the Nomu. You take care of disintegration and portals. Izuku said, as the man nodded his head as Izuku went on the attack. With all three villains split apart, Izuku spent his entire fight in keeping the Nomu away from his MSTR as he beat it into SBMSN. Punch after punch, kick after kick, tail swipe combining into another kick sent it into the water zone as Izuku slowly crawled into the water. Aizawa watched as his student willingly entered the water as if it was second nature as the hand villain began to laugh. Ha 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 ha. He won't survive against my Nomu as well as other villains there. The hand villain called out. And as soon as he said that, the other villains who were inside the water came running out screaming about a monster inside the water zone. As the villains ran over to the hand villain, they pleaded to be taken away from the area since there was a monster amongst them all. As the hand villain was about to scratch his neck in frustration as well as fury, a black blur had come flying out of the water towards the sky through the dome of the USJ. And what they all saw come out of the water afterwards was downright terrifying as a giant Ghidorah monster had appeared from the water zone of the USJ roaring into the sky as if it won a fight. Is that Midoriya? Aizawa asked as the other villains stared in both awe as well as complete fear. He beat my Nomu, that Nomu was supposed to kill All Might. That is legitimately cheating. The man-child screamed in frustration. Looking at the young man, Aizawa spoke up to him as he was wanting this fight to be over with so that they could look over the footage. But just as he was about to open his mouth, the glass from the dome had broken down again as a new monster had appeared in the area. It had massive wings as well as multiple legs that were as sharp as daggers at the end, and it had orange eyes with a look of contempt for the new Ghidorah. As the Ghidorah finally noticed the presence of the newcomer, he narrowed his emerald and moth-like eyes as he growled at the creature. The new monster clicked as it screeched at Izuku before going on the attack. Unknown to everyone else, Tokyo was being attacked by a similar monster but bigger than what was attacking Izuku. Outside the USJ, 13 had been calling all the heroes and told them about how the USJ was being attacked and that Izuku and Aizawa were locked inside the building. After hearing that the teachers were going to be on their way over to the building as fast as possible, she heard one of her students make a screaming sound. Looking over, she saw how he was showing his classmates about an attack coming from Tokyo, who at this point was a massive monster who had no wings and had massive legs. It had grayish-orange colored eyes as it smashed buildings in its wake in order to search for something. Alright class, get on the bus and get ready to head out. We need to escape from the USJ before that mist villain teleports us back there. 13 said, as the students got on board the bus. It was here that some of the girls had called her over. What is it, Uraraka-chan? 13 asked, as Ochako stared at the woman. Is Izuku going to be okay? She asked in complete fear. Don't worry, there is a reason why he has those dorsal plates on his back, they are more than an intimidation display. 13 said, cryptically as she remembered the conversation between her and Nizu. So what do you need me to teach the child of Godzilla? 13 asked, 5 hours before the trip happened. Whatever happens at the USJ today, you are to allow young Midoriya to fight whatever, and whoever arrives. You cannot stop him from entering his alpha predator instincts to fight a new threat to his reign over the earth. Nizu said, as 13 looked at him incredulously. What about the possible damage he could cause to the building? 13 asked in complete worry. You don't need to worry about him. If he damages the building, it isn't anything that Cementos can't handle. He will be able to bring the damage to property to a minimum if there is a chance of not doing too much. But if there isn't a choice in stopping the damage, he has full authority to fight whatever comes to fight him. Nizu said, not leaving any more arguments for discussion. I'm sorry for the outburst. 13 said, as she left the office. Shaking her head, she enters the bus when she noticed a blur coming to the building from above and slammed into the roof of the building. What the F was that? The entire class screamed out, as glass had been blasted to the sky. Inside the dome, Izuku was seen fighting with the new monster as he tossed it around the different zones of the USJ. It really wasn't that powerful against him. Even if it landed some hits against his body, it seemed as if it really didn't have any experience in fighting him. And since Izuku has the mind of a human whose brain capacity is going millions of miles a second, the monster had no chance in hell against him. He was basically toying with the creature as if it was a new toy. But as soon as the creature had noticed its failed attack to kill him, it tried to flee from the area as Izuku gave chase. If this creature was going to where he thought it was, he needed to stop it. He stepped out of the flood zone of the USJ as he followed the creature and made sure to grab his teacher in the process as he broke through the building and placed him on the roof of the bus. With him breaking the glass on the bus window, he told 13 to drive the bus to the safety of the school campus as he had Yaoyorozu place a camera on Izuku's back. As he was chasing the monster that was taking flight into the sky, Izuku felt something stick to his upper back, and as he turned to see who did it, he saw Yaoyorozu smiling at him before nodding. Returning the nod to her, he moved to give chase and headed towards the ocean where he could move faster to catch up. As it turned out, the new monster had arrived near the ocean as well, as if in search of something important. And as it caught its breath, Izuku stayed beneath the surface as he waited for it to lean its head down closer to the water for the perfect time to strike. As soon as it went to drink from the salty seawater, Izuku struck as soon as its face guzzled some water down its throat and grabbed it by the wing and pulled it into the water. Knowing his advantage in the water against the creature, he started to twist the wing of the creature as he increased the pressure on it as he felt it rip and tear from it. As soon as he pushed the wing out of the way, he swam to catch up to his prey when another creature appeared and tackled him into the water. As it slammed its claw into his lower abdomen, he released his atomic breath and sent it blasted back when he noticed something off about his atomic ray. My power is being suppressed, he thought to himself. Shaking his head, he decided to go full power in fighting these monsters, and he could sense his father's presence watching the fight from afar, gauging his power compared to the other monsters of this world. Getting into his own fighting stance, he growled at the creatures as multiple helicopters had arrived on the scene in order to record the event. As the two had rushed Izuku, he went for the injured one after tail swiping the other into the water as he grabbed the claws of the smaller monster and pulling it to him as he grabbed the head of it and slammed it into the water as he stepped on its neck. Holding it under the water, he watched as the other one, noticing how his instincts told him that it was a female, but he had no clue as to what creature it was within his father's reign. Just as he was about to attack the female monster, a new one appeared similar in looks to Mothra, but it was different in terms of looks. It had purple markings on its wings as it started to screech at the female monster that had been fighting Izuku. Looking down, he noticed that the bubbles from the monster he was standing on had ceased as he decided that it was surely dead. As he took a few steps from it, he decided to follow that pre-quirk movie about double tapping, and as he charged an atomic blast at the smaller monster, he picked it up from the water and opened its mouth as he fired it down its throat. As its body awoke from being essentially drowned, it started to flail from being blasted down its guzzle, and it soon started to burn from the edges of its neck to its torso. And soon enough the head was decapitated from the body as said body fell into the water. Giving a winning roar into the sky, both female monsters ahead of himself looked over as he dropped the head of the creature into the ocean water as he lowered his gaze on the female monster in front of him. Clearly the Mothra look-alike was on his side since it had some damage dealt to the creature in front of him, but the Mothra monster was damaged even more than the female monster. Looking at her nose, she had his markings on her wings as she looked away as if embarrassed. It wasn't long until Izuku ran after the other creature as he slammed into it, causing it to be surprised, but it wouldn't go down without a fight as it bit into his gills on his neck. As Izuku felt pain in his Titan form for the first time, he was pulled down into the water by the female monster as he had no clue how to stop it from releasing its grip on him. But as soon as he faked being dead, she started to release her grip when it was all over. He swiftly, faster than she could predict, jumped onto her body and started to rip her to shreds. His alpha instincts telling him to end it now before she could take on his champion. Whatever the hell that means. As soon as the creature had no legs to walk on, Izuku stepped onto her chest as he glared down at her as he roared into her face. She was going to die, and he would make it a swift one if she allowed him to do it. He wasn't okay with killing anything, but since she was a threat to his very existence, he wouldn't allow for her to live. As she growled in solemnness, Izuku reached down and he bit down on her neck as her orange, gray eyes stared into his emerald moth. He blinked twice as she blinked once as he snapped her neck with a massively loud crack. As soon as her limp body fell into the water, Izuku roared into the sky once more as the people who watched the news live had been in shock. It was here that they watched as Izuku's Titan form moved closer to the Mothra monster and they thought that he would kill the new arrival. But were pleasantly surprised when they heard a mass of clicking and groans from the two of them as Izuku for some reason lifted the Mothra creature and moved towards the ocean. As soon as they were out of view from the news, the helicopters had left the area to report on the devastation that one of the monsters had done to Tokyo.